Welcome to Daily Bible Devotions. We mentioned yesterday the historical test for the New Testament. So let's go through those historical tests one by one. First one, do we have early testimony? So generally, the earlier the sources, the more accurate is the testimony. What do we mean by early? Meaning that if an event happened today, witnesses would give an account of the event as early as today, or probably tomorrow, or probably the next day. If the testimony is very far from the date of the incident being questioned, then the testimony becomes less reliable. The farther it gets, the longer it gets before the testimony is produced after the event, the less reliable it is. And the thing about the New Testament is that these testimonies from witnesses happened very soon after the events, especially if compared to other historical documents. So, one, yes, we have early testimony. Second, do we have eyewitness testimony? Meaning, are the ones talking about the incident were really present during the time of the incident? For example, if I died and someone else says that he or she witnessed that I was killed by this somebody. Now, if that person is a witness, an eyewitness, then that makes the statement credible. But what if the one saying that I was killed by somebody is someone who just heard the story from another person, who just heard the story from another person? Then that makes the testimony unreliable. Do we have eyewitness testimonies for the New Testament? Yes. You have there Peter, you have John, who were there during the time that Jesus lived. What they wrote, they actually saw. In fact, they wrote that in the New Testament. So they were eyewitness accounts. They were eyewitnesses. Third, do we have testimony from multiple independent eyewitness sources? Multiple independent eyewitnesses confirm that the events really occurred, meaning they are not fiction, and they provide additional details that a single source might miss. True independent sources normally tell the same basic story but with differing details. Historians sometimes call this coherence with dissimilarity. Here's something that we have to clarify. Some people who look at the New Testament or who looks at the Bible, they say that there are some contradictions. And when they say contradictions, usually they were talking about the similarities. Just because one person is not saying the exact same thing as another person, that does not mean that they're contradicting each other, or that does not mean that they were not eyewitnesses of the incident. The similarities like that are normal and natural. In fact, think about this. Two people watching a movie, when they go out of the cinema, they would tell slightly different variations, or they have varying stories about what the movie is about. Did they watch the same movie? Yes. But those two people would give different stories about the movie. Why? Those dissimilarities are actually normal because of the differences in perspectives of the two people. If one person is viewing an incident from this angle and another person is viewing an incident, the same incident, from another angle, the tendency is there will be some dissimilarities in their stories, in their narration. But the basic story, the core of the message is the same because they're witnessing the same thing. Now, that's the beauty of having different independent eyewitness sources. And is that true for the New Testament? Yes, we have multiple independent eyewitness sources. When we say independent, meaning they did not sit down together and talked about, okay, what are we going to write? Oh, I will write this, you will write that. No, they did not do that. And if you want the same exact lines, the same exact story, it would sound unnatural. It would be like a script. In fact, when you go to court and different witnesses would say exactly the same line, that is actually suspicious for the judge. That is actually suspicious for the court. They would say that these lines were actually scripted. And that's unnatural. So the similarities, so long as there's coherence in the main theme, in the main story, that is very natural. And yes, we have that in the New Testament. Okay, fourth, are the eyewitnesses trustworthy? Now you would see this in court drama or in court series. Now, if you have eyewitnesses, all you have to do to attack the statements is to attack the credibility of the eyewitness or the eyewitnesses. If they're not credible, if they said something that is actually a lie, if they are not trustworthy, then that makes the whole statement unreliable. And are these eyewitnesses trustworthy when it comes to the New Testament? Should we believe them? And one thing that we always take into account when we want to know if someone is trustworthy or not is their character. What is their character? What are their motives? What will they gain if they will say this? And the thing about the New Testament writers is with the things that they wrote, they never gained power, they never gained influence, they never gained treasures from that. In terms of motives, they have very, very little, if any, motives for actually writing those things. Their characters, their people during that time, they lacked the character of the Christians. They're being persecuted, yet they persisted, they persevered. Are they trustworthy? Yes, generally speaking, they are trustworthy. Number five, do we have corroborating evidence from archaeology or other writers? What does that do? It adds confirmation to what they're saying. If what they're saying is this, and then archaeological records or other writers would confirm what they're saying, then that would confirm that these statements are actually true. And yes, we have that with the New Testament documents. Number six, do we have any enemy attestation? What does that mean? If opponents of the eyewitnesses admit certain facts the eyewitnesses say are true, then those facts probably are true. For example, if someone is biased towards you, when they say something, well, that is kind of expected. But if someone hates you but commends you nonetheless, then that makes the statement credible. Another example of that is Paul. Initially, Paul persecuted Christians. He hated the Christians. He captured the Christians. But eventually, he turned around. Why? Why? That is an example of enemy attestation. And in fact, there were other non-biblical sources that are not in favor. In fact, we talked about this already. There were some anti-Christians who affirmed the veracity of the statements in the New Testament. Seventh and last, does the testimony contain events or details that are embarrassing to the authors? Well, since most people do not like to record negative information about themselves, any testimony that makes the author look bad is probably true. Now, I mentioned this in passing about the eyewitnesses being trustworthy. Now, when they wrote something about themselves that are negative, that are embarrassing, well, that makes it reliable. Why? Because if they're willing to expose their own vulnerabilities and yet at the same time affirm some things, it means they're not sugarcoating things. It means that they're willing to be embarrassed in favor of what they are saying. New Testament writers, they were persecuted because of what they're saying. They were hunted because of what they wrote. And the fact that they even wrote that despite of what will happen, if despite of what people will say against them, despite of the risk that they will incur after saying or writing those things, that makes their statements reliable because they have less motivation to lie, they have less motivation to conspire, and that makes their statements very trustworthy. After looking at all these historical tests, in fact, here's the thing, as someone who studies history, we tend to be very, very strict with the historical reliability of the New Testament, of the Bible in general. But do we even apply the same historical test to other documents? Some other historical documents, once you read them in history books, once you read them on the internet, once you read them from an article, from a website, from a newspaper, it's not even normal for people to examine and analyze the sources. we accept them immediately. But when it comes to the Bible, we become very, very hard. But I challenge you, this historical test, the New Testament documents have passed this historical test. Try to apply this historical test to other documents, and you would see how reliable the New Testament documents are compared to other historical sources. So again, the New Testament documents would pass this historical test with flying colors. You can do so yourself.